Namaste. My name is Preity Upala, and I am a global thought leader and a multimedia personality. Welcome to my podcast, The Preity Experience. Join me as I explore some of the most fascinating and crucial issues that affect our world today. I take a unique global perspective on these issues, and the very foundation of my insights is humanity and spirituality. I'm Preity Upala, and welcome to the Preity Experience.
Namaste and Swagatam to all the panelists and our audience. Thank you for joining us to celebrate World Sanskrit Day, a day to really celebrate the biggest gift of our culture, as well as a day to propagate and pledge the relevance of Sanskrit in modern world. India as a nation is a treasure trove of cultures, the oldest and the richest in the world. All of us celebrate and accept the fact, but truly, very few are able to connect or understand the depth. And one of the biggest reasons is that somewhere the link to the culture, which is Sanskrit, has been ignored. And although Sanskrit connects us to our past scriptures and the huge knowledge base, why is it relevant now? This is what we would like to understand and discuss today. And it's our pleasure to have a panel from diverse backgrounds, both academically and culturally. With that, I would like to invite our next speaker. She's Preity Upala. She's joined us from United States, and it's pretty late there, so thank you for joining us on this special day. Preity is a former investment banker turned thought leader, a media personality, and a Hollywood entrepreneur. Global peace dominates the forefront of the former Miss India International's life purpose. And it is what drives her to connect people together through a series of spiritual endeavors and media productions. Her weekly spiritual radio show, The Eternal Hour, can be heard on iHeartRadio and a popular YouTube channel called The Preity Experience. She's a certified Dharma ambassador, and she speaks internationally on topics of Dharma, culture, and spiritualism. Preity is passionate about global cultural issues, involved in several philanthropic activities, and her life dharma is to be a global thought leader and ambassador for diplomacy and potential international liaison between governments. Thank you, Preity. I'd love to hear from you.
Namaste, everyone. My name is Preity Upala, and I am so honored to speak here at this amazing event on this very special day. I'm thrilled that we have a day like this, because there are so many beautiful things, especially that come from our culture, that even we don't really recognize or give it the reverence that it deserves. So having a International Yoga Day or the World Sanskrit Day is, I think, essentially important, and so honored to connect with all of you today. As the moderator very kindly was explaining my bio, I sort of was in the corporate world in Australia, and then I gave all of that up to move to in New York and then LA here in America, and to work in the film business and in arts and the creative space. But my dharma has evolved since then. I still obviously am very much tied in to Hollywood, because I think it's a great platform to actually do dharmic work, which is what my whole thing is about anyway. But it's been quite a journey, and I find myself very much immersed in Vedic culture and our civilizational history, and sort of speaking and writing about it extensively, because I've opened the Pandora's box of all the biases that are out there and the phobias and so on. And it's all very interesting. I think all we can do is just do our best. And I think if you come from truth, everything will always be beautiful in the end. So I just wanted to, I'll keep it short and sweet this evening. So I wanted to talk about, obviously the topic is Sanskrit. Deva Bhasha, the language of gods. If COVID has taught us anything, it has taught us to really question and ask us ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in, and what kind of frameworks do we want running our planet? Because I think what we have seen in the last 5 or 6 months is that the way we were going is not sustainable, and it just simply it is not the way for the future. I think we are cultures, or the world at large, is forced to ask ourselves, where is all this leading to? Which brings me to my next point. um, there are some ideologies, thankfully, that actually can show us a way out. And in fact, in these turbulent, challenging times, perhaps they're the only frameworks that actually, kind of rise and elevate themselves. And that one of them, of course, is Sanatan Dharma. I really think that it is showing the whole world how it is the path for the future for humanity. Now, central to Sanatan Dharma is Sanskrit, the language of the god. Sanskrit is a sculpted language, and it is sculpted to perfection. It's sort of a miracle that this language has come to be when you think about sort of what has been said about it, right? It's the oldest language in the world, and it's the root of all the other languages, not just in India, but around the world at large. And it's so fascinating to think that you have Germanic languages and languages in Finland and in very exotic parts of Europe that actually stem from Sanskrit. So we're worlds apart, but nothing wavers the connection, I think, to source. And it's great that by and large people really recognize that. And it seems like it's eternal. It's been there forever. And I hope if we do what we are supposed to do in honoring and treasuring it, it will remain until hopefully the very end of time. It's a scientific language, of course. It's the only AI friendly language out there. And even NASA, we have, I'm sure, read and heard about all these amazing reports that institutions like NASA come out and say things about Sanskrit, and now we're finding that it helps you concentrate better. There are universities and schools in the UK and in other parts of Europe that do chanting Sanskrit mantras to really activate the brain, to uh, promote focus, concentration, and just mental agility and ability. And this is a wonderful thing. And I'm just thrilled that people are recognizing all of this. I think it's so important to uh, really revive it, though, both around the world, of course, but it really starts from here. It starts from India, because if just because it's lasted for so long, it doesn't mean we can take anything for granted. I think we live in very interesting times, and we really must honor and treasure this gift that we have. It's a gift that we give to the world, but it's really a gift to ourselves as well. Now, I was exploring a little bit on what spiritual masters have said about Sanskrit, because I think it's always fascinating to see, interesting things that have been said by enlightened souls, enlightened beings. And I know that a lot of the audience here might be fans and admirers and followers of the great Sri Aurobindo. So I wanted to look up what he had said about Sanskrit, and it turns out that he was quite a great admirer and somebody who had very high hopes and thought very highly of Sanskrit. So I just want to read a few things that I found. Now, there's no doubt that the Sanskrit language had a very deep and profound impression on Sri Aurobindo. It it might even be said that he approached this ancient language as if he was reacquainting himself with an old friend. And I think that's a beautiful way to put it. He saw it as something so familiar. he was obviously familiar already with the European classical languages, but he placed this ancient he placed the ancient and the classical creations of Sanskrit well above, in the front ranks among the world's great languages. And even personally, Sri Aurobindo had given in his writings, I think, some glimpses of the effect that Sanskrit had on him. For example, in the book On Himself, he speaks about when I first read Om Shanti 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 of the Upanishads, it had such a profound effect on me. Now, this is a very, I guess, a simple mantra, if you can call it that, but just saying it in its proper form and tone can have this incredible effect on people. And that's why it's obviously chanted or spoken at any spiritual occasion. So he was obviously very moved and inspired by Sanskrit. Now, another great spiritual teacher was the mother. Now, the mother had some very interesting takes on Sanskrit. She says that Sanskrit opens the door to all the other languages of India, and I think that this is indispensable. But the ideal would be that in a few years, we have a rejuvenated Sanskrit as the representative language of India. That is, some kind of spoken Sanskrit that will be the link language and that will be the official language. Because Sanskrit is behind all the other languages of India, and that's why it should be structured that way. Because today, English happens to be the language of this country, and I'm talking about India here. And that's great for international relations and business and so on, but it's a bit abnormal considering it's not native to India. I just think that one should always begin with one's own, what is one's own. And the issue is, once we start talking about what should be the national language, everyone quarrels because they all think that their native language should be the national language. Well, this is where Sanskrit has a solution, because it's the most ancient language. I think no one can deny its place. So if you do have it as a national language in some form, I just don't think that there would be the quarreling and sort of the divisiveness, because everybody, I think, accepts the Sanskrit for what it is. So that was the mother's view on it, and I just think that she hit a nerve, or she touched on the pulse of the issue. As somebody who's traveled quite a bit, and I speak 5 languages myself, I do think that language is how we communicate with each other and the world, and also how we project ourselves, how we present ourselves to the world. And I just think that Sanskrit is a symbol of dharma, right? And all that is good in our culture. And it's reflected, it's sort of a manifestation of all of that. So I just think it's so important that we, at some point, think about making this some sort of, maybe a national language in some form, and maybe even the basics should be taught to all children. And then if you want to go beyond the basics, of course, that's optional. But I think at least a very little part of it, I think every Indian should proudly learn about it, and should at least be able to speak a few sentences, because I think even today, even Hindi has sort of that sort of stature. Even in the South, a lot of people speak Hindi. So I don't see why that shouldn't be Sanskrit instead. And nobody would object to Sanskrit, of course, because it's the root of all the other languages. And, I just sort of think about this study of when you think about linguistics and Indology and so on, I think there's such a hot debate that we've had honestly for decades about this whole Aryan migration myth, theory and so on. Well, one of the facets or one of the points of evidence that sort of busts that myth, of course, is the language aspect of it. When you think about uh, where does this all begin, right? It does begin with Sanskrit, and it's always Indo-European. It's never European-Indian. So we know the root language, and then where did it spread to? And among many other factors, it is a big part of why our culture, the Vedic philosophy, Sanatan Dharma, all of this amazing culture and wisdom was native and indigenous to India. It wasn't transferred to us from some place up in Central Asia or uh, the steppe areas or Europe. So I think it's something that we need to know as Indians, our own history. And I think when we follow the journey of Sanskrit, it sort of takes us um, through the history of the civilization in a way. So I think it's so important that we really know enough about it, right? Because I think sadly this sort of myth is still out there, and there are people who just don't want to accept a different narrative. um, I actually had a really interesting experience recently where I had a conversation with a spiritual teacher, and he happened to be American, but he had spent much time in India and in Nepal, and we were talking about Sanskrit, and he made such a poignant point, and I thought I'd share that with you because I think that um, what he said was he was very observant, and I think it was very apt. He said, you know, of course, the mantras are very powerful, they're primordial sounds, they awaken consciousness within us, they actually they lead us to ultimately gain moksha. I mean, it's sort of a pathway to that over time, and it's great that people are chanting. But the point he wanted to make was, these days even the priests, even scholars, they chant these mantras so fast, and they just their consciousness or they are mindful of of obviously the mantra and the pronunciation, but uh, their focus is really just on the chanting. And I think what they're missing is the pause between the two verses. It's the space between the sounds, is the space between the words, which is powerful. That's where the magic happens. And I think there's too many people who are chanting and not stopping and pausing, because that's where it all happens. And I think it's the pause between the sounds where one can anchor in to source and really feel the effect of the word and the sound itself. So I just thought, as a Caucasian person, as a non-Indian, for him to sort of notice that and make a point, to me, I just thought he was on something, and I appreciated him for sharing. I just thought that it's something, and it's really the space between the sounds, which is where you can anchor into Ananda, which is bliss. So I really feel that Sanskrit is India, and India is Sanskrit, and I think we have a duty to preserve and uphold this incredible gift. And it really is the language of the gods. It does have the ability to help us on our spiritual path, to awaken consciousness within us, to be an anchor for bliss. The sound itself can also help us go deeper and find that inner peace. It's extremely peaceful to just even sit in the presence of it, and sit in maybe even silence with the sound in your mind. Uh, but it's our job to uphold this, also obviously to showcase it to the world, but more important, I think we need to cherish it, because sadly, within no, if you blink, sometimes you might lose it all. And I think that we have done, somehow it's been a miracle that it's been upheld, right? In also in a very pure form. It's thousands of years later, here it is, and every university in the world has a Sanskrit department, and there's probably more non-Indians who speak it and study it. And I'm involved with the Hindu University of America here, and you can do a PhD in Sanskrit, you can do a master's in Sanskrit. So it's wonderful that it really does need to go more mainstream, because when I think of other languages that are mainstream, and you think about, when you sort of compare them, you just think, well, what's going on here? So I think it's our duty to come together as a people, as a country, as a civilization, to be proud of this amazing language, and also do our best to showcase it to the world, but more importantly, to really cherish, preserve, and honor it. Because I think it is the link language for the universe, in many ways. And I think it is going to be the one that keeps us all together. In some ways, it's a unifying force. So I just wanted to share my thoughts with you on that. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I look forward to engaging with you some more. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak and share. And I really hope I get the opportunity to speak on this platform again. Namaste.
Thank you, Preity, for really being an ambassador and torchbearer of Indian culture. Very interesting on how, you threw light on how Sanskrit can become the national language of the country, because truly it is the root language for so many other languages and cultures in India. And, Sanskrit can and must become a global phenomena. And we hope that you can take this forward through your work. Thank you once again.